For anyone that is here for ABA CEUs, if you go to our webinar calendar at the top, there will be a link that outlines our frequently asked questions, and I'll give you information on downloading your CEU after the webinar. There will also be a link on the calendar to access the CEU quiz to gain your CEU certificate at the end as well. If you have any questions, you can use the Q&A. Yes, the quiz will be emailed as well, either by the end of the day today or in the morning. All right, I put a link in the chat to our ABA webinar calendar, and at the top of that is a link to our frequently asked questions. Right. We're going to give it just a few more seconds as people come in. All right. Kristin, if we want to go ahead, we can get started.
Okay.
All right, so just a few reminders for those of you who are here to access CEUs. So we will post the codes that need to get the CEUs on the screen. We will verbally say them. Once we move on, we will not repeat them. So either write them down, jot them on your computer, anything you need to do to have them. You'll need to stay for the entire webinar and then collect both of the CEU code words and complete the post-webinar survey that will be shared at the end of the webinar in a link. We will also have a link to the CEU quiz on our ABA webinar calendar, and that will be posted within the last 10 minutes of the webinar so you can get your CEU certificate. For those of you that have questions on how to download your CEU certificate, there is a frequently asked questions document that is hyperlinked on the ABA webinar calendar as well. And I will post that in the chat again so everybody can access that. The recording of this webinar will be available for CEUs and we post it within 1 week of this webinar. We will also be posting the video of this that is not available for CEUs on our webinar learning center. And there are links that are hyperlinked at the very bottom of our ABA webinar calendar, bringing you to our full library of asynchronous CEUs, as well as our full library of webinar videos. And we will also have the slides on our Thinkific website. All right. So MPG is a multidisciplinary team consisting of over 200 adult and child psychologists, neuropsychologists, board-certified behavior analysts, and special educators. We provide services virtual and in person on the Upper West Side in our office. Our ABA services are primarily provided in home, schools, or community settings, and we work with all ages, most conditions and challenges. And like I said, we work in the greater New York City metro. So we have the Bronx, Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens, New Jersey, Long Island, and Westchester. As you can see from our multidisciplinary team, we do provide wraparound care. So we provide psychological testing, ABA, and behavioral and educational services. Our psych services that you can see here consist of a wide variety to ensure that we are providing the most comprehensive and wraparound care as possible to the patients that we see. We provide services and patients can pay through private pay, commercial health insurance, or through DOE's impartial hearing order payment process. At MPG, our vision is to create a future where individuals and their families feel supported, connected, and empowered. And our mission is to provide multidisciplinary integrated support for individuals and their families who experience mental health, behavioral, and educational challenges. And I'm going to do a brief introduction for today's presenter, which is Kristin Fayad. So Kristin is a New York State licensed behavior analyst, board certified behavior analyst, and a certified special education and elementary education teacher in New Jersey. She received her undergraduate and master's degree from Rutgers University and completed an online BCBA course sequence at FIT, Florida Institute of Technology. She completed this coursework in 2013 and began searching for supervisory experience, which is when she decided to pursue a master's degree in teaching as applied behavior analysis at Teachers College in Columbia University in New York. She taught a self-contained classroom with students from 3rd to 5th grade using the CABAS. She used evidence-based ABA instructional approaches and curricula, including direct instruction in collaboration with mentors at Teachers College. Most recently, she has worked in New York as a clinical supervisor in the home and telehealth settings. She also supervises some cases internationally and is involved in disseminating ABA in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Kristin's passionate about teaching and guiding all individuals with or without developmental disabilities. She firmly believes that the principles of ABA can improve all individuals' quality of life across all skill sets like communication, academics, social, and adaptive skills. Her goal is to help other professionals and parents to utilize these evidence-based practices in the natural environment with all learners. She is passionate about helping students be successful at school and being independent and successful learners at home as well. Her main goal is to work with teachers and parents so that they utilize effective strategies to increase positive behavior in both neurotypical and neurodiverse clients. So without further ado, I will pass this on to Kristin to talk about increasing spontaneous language.
Thank you. Thank you, Lakin. Welcome, everybody. This is a topic that I'm really passionate about, as well as school success, right? And ABA can help improve school success. Language is one of the strongest indicators of school success. So I figured, why not dive into 2 strategies that will help your learners. So today we're talking about increasing spontaneous language. The objectives will be to decrease prompt dependencies with speaker behavior, learn procedures to a pure manned intervention. It's called speaker immersion, and then learn procedures to a pure tact intervention, which is intensive tact instruction. I'm going to teach you how to measure spontaneous speaker behavior in the natural environment and also to analyze graphs from the literature. Oh, sorry. Okay, so here is the first poll. I'm going to launch it. How much do you know about intensive tact instruction and or speaker immersion procedures? So you haven't heard of it, you've used both of them, maybe used one of them, or you've read about it or heard a little bit about it. Well, I'm glad that many of you haven't heard of it, because this is going to be beneficial to you guys. Some of you have used one of them, so you'll learn about something new. All right, thank you everybody for responding. I'm just going to end the poll and share the results so you can see who your colleagues are today. Okay. So why are these interventions important? Many times children with autism require verbal prompts to communicate, and we kind of want to not always lean on verbal prompts because pure tacts and pure mands are super important. It's great when a child can mand as an intraverbal mand or tact as an intraverbal tact, but we also need to plan for the pure verbal operants. We want to also learn to avoid or reverse these prompt dependencies that our learners may already have, and design instruction for speakers or for future speakers and speakers who will be able to initiate their own language. Children with disabilities typically receive instruction with these partial antecedents that are that include verbalizations from others. So this leads to acquisition of impure mands and impure tacts. So how do we create or capture the natural EOs to teach pure forms of the verbal operants? So the verbal operants that we're speaking of today are mands and tacts. Here are the others, according to Cooper, Heron, and Heward, 2007. Okay, so we're focusing and diving into these 2. I'm going to touch on the 7 dimensions of ABA as we go through the webinar. And the first one is intensive tact instruction that we'll be talking about. It is an approach to test the effects of pure tact instruction on the acquisition of mands and tacts in a natural environment. So the intervention itself is in a more restricted teaching direct instruction environment. But the effects of this intervention is to increase the frequency of pure mands and pure tacts in a natural or non-instructional environment, okay? Tacts are actually, prerequisites to higher order operands, right? So in order for a child to acquire language naturally, they need to have tacts. And children who have more language also elicit more language from adults, and therefore their language becomes stronger and stronger. This intervention is designed to give children a jump start so that they can initiate language and also have more access to adult attention and more social interactions that will therefore increase their acquisition of language. So it's kind of like that self-fulfilling prophecy, right? The more language a child has, the more language and attention that they receive from adults. And that's super helpful in acquiring more language. So let's keep going. So here we go. Intensive tact instruction, or I might call it ITI for today, is an evidence-based approach to increase and teach the pure tacts. There are many of our learners who only tact when we give them impure, only tact impurely. For example, when this woman on the picture might be saying, "What do you see? What's this pink object?" Or, "What is this?" That would be an impure tact. A child who emits pure tacts, and I was just observing my friend's 2-year-old, and I was like, whoa. So, I'm around so many children who have disabilities or need language support, that when I saw my friend's 2-year-old just speaking and tacting everything in her way, it allowed for her to have so much more attention and social interaction from adults around her. And that's kind of what we're trying to induce in our learners, right? This ability to initiate language. So also this intervention could also result in the emergence of a full naming repertoire, which is in short terms, just like acquiring language naturally without requiring direct instruction. And has been adapted to use with adolescents with emotional behavioral disorders to teach audience accurate tacts. I'm not going to get into this too much because it's kind of an extension of ITI, but I found this article super interesting, and I believe it's in the supporting documents that you're going to have access to, that Schaufler and Greer 2006 actually taught, I think, middle schoolers to replace inappropriate language, such as curse words or just school inappropriate language, with appropriate language, and used intensive tact instruction to do it. And so they adapted this protocol for this other population. Today, we're going to talk more about our younger learners or early learners. And who is this actually for? So it can be for individuals with language disabilities or just language delays. It could be that, a child who's in a lower SES is more likely to have language delays just because of their the opportunities and the type of exchanges that they have with adults. Children in their early years who experience verbal exchanges with their parents tend to be at a higher risk for language delays and a slower pace of vocabulary development. So before I even go into the intervention, I thought it'd be interesting to show you this graph so that you can see the effects that this has had. I've personally used it with lots of my clients, and when I speak with other BCBAs, I usually like to troubleshoot with other BCBAs, and when somebody asks me to help them because they're, not acquiring tacts or they're not generalizing tacts and using them in initiating them themselves, right? I usually start by suggesting this intervention because it's easy to use. It has great effects, and I've seen it with my own clients, so that's why I want to share it with you today. And I put here that we're thinking about generality, right? Because we want to see that this is just the pre and post probe. So this is not the data from the actual intervention. This is just the information of how students A, B, and C did prior to intensive tact instruction. And then after the dotted phase change lines, you'll see the post probes. There's 4 post probes here. So you can see that student C and student B, as well as student A, did not have not many mans, and some of them were not observed to have any tax. Student A had some tax, but significantly lower than in the post probes, right? And so it's interesting that this is an intensive tact instruction protocol, but it also has an impact on the acquisition of MANs just indirectly. So it's kind of like a vicarious effect. So you can see the dark black bar are the tacts and the light gray bar are MANs. And these are the measurements, these are frequency. This is a measurement of frequency in the natural environment. Okay, so this is not like in a direct instruction if the child responded or didn't respond. This is just the child free operant of emitting MANs and tacts in their natural environment before this intervention and after this intervention, which is why I wanted to bring attention to the generality of this intervention, because we can measure how a child does in an instructional setting, but when we see the effects come out in the natural setting, that's kind of what we're really interested in, right? Is this actually socially significant? And I believe it is, according to this data. This is just the fact that it's been replicated. Further studies have also utilized it. I've replicated the study myself as well. And so just so you can get an idea of how this intervention has functioned for various learners. Here we see participant 1 and 2 with relatively low MANs, tacts, and conversational units. The intervention was repeated 5 times to get to see if repeating the intervention would increase higher rates of MANs and tacts in the natural environment. So in fact, they did, especially with the tacts. We see a higher impact with the polka dots with the tacts. So how do we do intensive tact instruction, right? What is this intervention all about? So as I said, it is a direct instruction. It's in a more restricted environment, the actual intervention of it. It's not time consuming. It's meant to be presented relatively quickly. I would say in like maybe 15 or 20 minutes a day. It's a daily presentation of 100 pure tact SDs. So a pure tact SD means that you're just presenting a visual. Typically, I've done this with visuals. I guess you can tact smells and auditory stimuli as well. But for the sake of this, just to keep it as simple as possible to get the procedures to you, you're going to present a tact opportunity. It's a picture. And I don't know why it says vocal SD. Ignore this vocal SD part. It's just the picture, okay? The student then responds. Oops. The student then responds. And the consequence would either be reinforcement, attention, right, which is the natural consequence of a tact, or the correction procedure. A correction procedure would be to state the correct response, the child repeats it, you're presenting the visual stimulus again for the children to respond, and the child would not receive any reinforcement for that correct response during the error correction, okay? Only when they present the correct response when the stimuli was presented right away. Reinforcement should just be attention and praise. That is the reinforcer for tact. So you need to make sure that you're using the appropriate reinforcement for a tact. If your child is not, or if your learner is not reinforced by attention, you could have like a token board for attending behaviors. Like, I like how your feet are on the floor. I like how you're sitting in your chair. Nice job looking at the pictures I'm showing you. And I've used token economies for those attending behaviors, but for the correct tact, I would use a lot of social praise, excitement, high fives and smiles, and just creating that, that connection between, tacting an item and gaining reinforcement from adults and making that connection for the child. The criterion was 90% accuracy across 2 consecutive sessions, okay? They need mastery of the whole set in order to do a post-probe. So you have 100 tacts a day that you are doing in addition to the other instruction that you're delivering. This is an intervention that you are adding on to the child's regular day. So when the child has met criterion for each of the categories, and I'm going to talk about the categories, then you would do a post-probe, and depending on the results from the post-probe, say, okay, I think that the learner should be emitting more language, then you're going to conduct this intervention again and pick new tacts to then do another post-probe, which you saw in the graphs before. So, you're gonna choose novel stimuli that the child does not have in their in the vocabulary already. You don't want to use the same stimuli as that was chosen in the baseline or the pre-probes. And you're choosing stimuli that the child does not have in their repertoire. So according to the this article, you have these were the categories and the stimuli per category. So you have 5 categories, 4 stimuli per category. For example, the first category is occupations, and we're teaching photographer, florist, doctor, and painter. The second category was transportation, and you're teaching car, train, boat, helicopter, considering that these are not in the child's repertoire. Okay, so you're going to have 4 per category. If you get 5 pictures, 5 exemplars of each of these, right? So you have 5 photographers, 5 florists, 5 doctors, 5 painters. You're gonna have 20 pictures for this category, and then 20, and then 20, and 20, and 20. That gives you 100 pictures or 100 tacts. They're actually just learning 20 new stimuli, but because you have various exemplars to factor in generalization and actual acquisition of this tact, then you're ending up with 100 tacts in a session. Okay, it's meant to be delivered very quickly, fast-paced instruction, and it's not meant to take like hours, right? It's just meant you have the material ready and you're going through the stimuli. So you have 5 examples of photographer, 5 exemplars of florist, and this is kind of just so that you can kind of picture how this would look, right? When the child masters one category, just increase the trials for the other categories so that the child can master all of set 1. Okay, so say transportation is mastered, then just increase the trials for other categories so that every category is mastered so that you can conduct post-probes. Poll 2, let's go to 2. How many pictures do you need during one session of ITI? Most of you are getting this right, so thank you. I know I talk fast, so you're following along. Thank you so much. I love the participation. Still, so many people are responding, so thank you. I know this one was kind of a trick question because I have a lot of numbers on the previous page. So how many pictures, not how many stimuli, how many pictures do you need in a session? You need, I'm going to share this with you. You need 100 pictures, right? You have 5 categories. If you have 4 stimuli per category, 5 exemplars, so 4 times 5, that's 20 pictures times 5 categories. That gives you 100 pictures. That's like a lot. But yes, you're going to show the child 100 pictures. They can have 100 opportunities to tact and to gain social reinforcement from you. Okay, now poll 3. How many categories of stimuli are there when utilizing ITI? Okay, most of you are getting this right. I think we're getting it. This is becoming clear. So how many categories? Remember there was like occupations, transportation, clothing, foods. There's 4 or 5. You can decide. And of course there's variations of this, but in this study, there were 4. Sometimes I use 5 categories. I'm going to share the results with you. 95% of you got it right. Okay, moving on. The first code word is categories. So we're going to post the codes that you need. I'm going to verbally say each one. So the first one is categories. We're moving on in a couple of seconds. Please stay for the full webinar so that you have both code words and you can complete the survey at the end of this webinar. You need these for your CEU cert. Okay, I'm moving on. Here's just another slide with sample stimuli. So the child, remember how there were 5 post probes? That's because they went through this intervention 5 times. So this child had several sessions in order for them to master the tacts of these 20 stimuli from set 1. So the photographer, the car, the hat, the school, apple, florist, train, scarf, classroom, banana, and so on, right? So set 1, when the child met criteria, 90% accuracy across 2 consecutive sessions, a post-probe was conducted in the natural environment. After that, the instructor then went back to intervention and used set 2, which are material that were not in the child's repertoire, new material, the child acquired new tacts, and then another post-probe. Okay, I remember those graphs that I showed you before in the very beginning. More tact sets, these are just ideas for you. This is intervention data, so you can see that these learners are acquiring it in about 4 sessions. I think that's also due to the correction procedure. There's no reinforcement for a correction, so that has a lot to do. There's also an FR1 reinforcer, so every correct response received reinforcement. There is 1 graph per, sorry guys. There is 1 graph per category. Okay, so you have musical instrument graph, you have the transportation graph, the community helper graph, and you have the phase change lines for each set. Remember the sets, right? These were the sets 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. In each set, there were 5 categories. And so if the criterion is met for 1 category, you would increase opportunities for the other categories in the set until a criterion was met for all of the items in set 1 to move on, okay? You can think of the targets as the short-term objectives of this goal, okay? And here are the probes. So you conduct the probes in non-instructional settings, the free play area, the lunch or snack table, hallway transitions. At home, it could be mealtime, playtime with a sibling, play date. How long were the probes? 5 minutes in each in 3 different non-instructional settings. So that gives you a 15-minute observation in total, right? 5 minutes across 3 settings. You're going to conduct this pre-probe and then after each mastery of a set. So you're observing the change in spontaneous language or free operant language in natural settings after having completed or met criterion on ITI. What are you measuring? Pure tacts and mans, just to see, oh, let's see if there is like some effect on pure mans as well. And in the studies there were, so this would be super interesting to measure and check on your own learners. So also, if there was an SD that was verbal or created an intraverbal mand or tact scenario, that wasn't counted in the probe. So you wouldn't count that. It would have to be a spontaneous initiation of the learner. So examples of recorded tacts were hi, Miss P, bus is here, Mike sandwich. Recorded mans that they had were things like juice, I want the book, my turn. If an adult asked, do you want juice or what is that? It was not counted in the probe. It has to be pure mans and tacts. Okay, moving on. We looked at this graph before. I'm just showing it to you again so that you can see, you know, after set 1, after set 2, after set 3, after set 4, 5. I guess the researcher here saw that, you know, tacts improved drastically and that, you know, for the study, this was significant to show the change of tacts from baseline to post set 5, right? Okay, here's your 4th poll. Which is true of intensive tact instruction? Is it that the probes consist of a set of stimuli to present that the child must score 90% accuracy, that the post probes consist of 3 5-minute observations across 3 non-instructional settings where the frequency of pure mans and tacts are recorded, or C, the intervention is conducted in the learner's natural environment, or D, impure tacts are taught and reinforced. So only one of these is true. Only one of these is true. So C says the intervention is conducted in the learner's natural environment. And I put that one there to trick you because the intervention is not conducted in the natural environment. the probes are conducted in the natural environment to test the effectiveness of the intervention, which is in a direct instruction type of environment. Okay, like a discrete trial. So I'm going to share the results with you. So those of you who said post probes consist of 3 5-minute observations across 3 non-instructional settings where the frequency of pure immersions and tacts are recorded, you are correct. I just explained why C was incorrect. The intervention is not in the natural environment, only the probes are. D, impure and pure tacts are taught. No, impure tacts are not taught. And A, the probes consist of a set of stimuli. Also no, and nobody put that. Thank you for nobody putting A. All right, probes are just natural, are just an observation of the frequency of pure tacts and immersions in the natural environment. Okay, an intervention was in an instructional environment. Okay, stop sharing this. And a note on reinforcement. Tacts by definition are a verbal operand which the function is controlled by a non-verbal discriminative stimulus and is followed by generalized conditioned reinforcement. What is the generalized conditioned reinforcement? Adult attention or social attention in general, can be from another child, right? A tact is a label, and the reinforcer has to be attention. All right. The next procedure or protocol is speaker immersion. You guys learned about the intensive tact instruction protocol just now. Speaker immersion is similar in the sense that the probes are going to be measured in the natural environment. Okay, and the intervention is also naturalistic, but captured and contrived. Okay, so it is similar to ITI in the sense that we're going to test the effectiveness of this intervention in the natural environment to make sure that children or the learners are utilizing pure immersions in the natural environment and not just when captured and contrived. All right. Oh, I just wanted to say something quickly about intensive tact instruction, that it was interesting that the researchers noted this, that it was interesting that the tacts that the children emitted in the post probes were not actually the ones directly taught in the intervention. So we see this adduction of a new tact, and they're assuming that this is probably because the child is learning to emit tacts to gain attention. So once they have acquired the reinforcer, the generalized reinforcer of attention, or emitting tacts for attention, they saw an increase overall in tacts, not just in the tacts that were taught, not just the 100 pictures that were shown or the 20 stimuli that were taught, but because they had now experienced gaining attention for emitting tacts, right? And so that was something that changed the child's behavior in the natural setting. And the fact that they were now tacting new stimuli that were not directly taught shows that the children were reinforced by or acquired the social attention as a reinforcer. Maybe it wasn't before. So that was just something I wanted to note, that this was not just to teach the function of tacting flower, tree, bush, and I don't know, carrot, right? You're not just teaching these specific stimuli. The idea of using the 5 categories is to broaden the tact repertoire of the child, and that the child is now learning to acquire attention from adults by tacting. It's not that the child needs to learn, you know, photographer, doctor, mailman. Those specific tacts are great, but it's not the actual purpose of this intervention. The purpose of this intervention is to increase spontaneous language, and that's what this intervention does. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of make note of that. I've used some pretty obscure tacts when I do this, especially with children who have a larger vocabulary but don't emit that vocabulary spontaneously. The children that I worked with had tons of fruits, vegetables, colors, shapes, everything. So I had to kind of get out there and either teach something like the Eiffel Tower, the Taj Mahal, or, you know, presidents, or I had to go into like different organs and teaching like heart, lungs, because some of the kids had tons of impure texts, but I needed stimuli. I need to find stimuli to teach them novel texts using this procedure. So kind of had to like be really creative and think out there for some of my learners, because they had tons of texts, but they were not pure texts. All right. Speaker immersion. It's an evidence-based protocol to increase pure mans. Okay. Also has been used to teach pure mans using autoclitics. Like, you know, I want the blah, blah, blah. Can I have the blah, blah, blah? So those are the autoclitics. It has also had an effect on an increase in tax, just like ITI had an increase in mans, showed an increase in mans. It's been used for children who've only manded when verbally prompted to do so. So children who have impure mans, but not pure mans. And I've included the seminal article here, which is in the supporting documents. Who are our target learners? Children who are under instructional control, attend to the faces and voices of adults, can emit echoics. They have some mans and texts potentially, and they're able to conduct some of their routine. I think this last one is kind of just like, it's not really, I wouldn't say that this is a requirement. It's just an observation from the study, but I would say an echoic repertoire is definitely necessary. Also instructional control and attending to the faces and voices of adults. I'm gonna move on. The two dependent variables, like remember I told you that we're measuring the frequency of mans and texts in the natural environment. So that's this first dark blue box, okay, non-instructional setting probe. The number of mans and texts during 3 10-minute observations. So in the study, it was free play, lunch, and group games or group play. And you're measuring the frequency of pure texts and mans, not the impure texts and mans. And again, this is 3 10-minute observations, a total of 30 minutes. They actually did it across 3 days. So they had more than just this, right? They had 90 minutes of observation. You can either replicate the study or you can choose to conduct the probes however you choose, right? This is how the study is suggesting it. This is how it's evidence-based. This is, so you're at least doing these 3 10-minute observations to count frequency of pure mans and texts. Then there was a second probe that was conducted. In addition to the natural environment, they wanted to measure the success of a child manding when EOs were either captured or contrived. So this was semi-naturalistic. It was an adult kind of manipulating the environment. 30 EOs were created and captured throughout the school day. These same EOs were used in the pre and post probe, but not during intervention. Okay, so an example of an EO could be the teacher blocking the child's cubby so that the child had to request either excuse me or can I get to my cubby or something like that. Missing pencil from their pencil box. Every child got a pencil box. This child's pencil was not in there and they needed the pencil to complete the task, right? Maybe there was a book withheld. So different opportunities for a child to mand, and there were 30 that were listed on the probe sheet. And then the adult or the researcher would record if the child responded as a non-vocal mand, such as screaming or grabbing, a non-target, which was maybe one word, and then the target mand, which was usually a whole phrase. Depends on your learner. Maybe your target is one word. So you would have to define that. Here were the sample probes. I love seeing the pre and post. So if you look at participant B, for example, you have okay, away, a book, star, square, circle. And then in the post probes, this is the list that was observed in the natural environment during a 30-minute observation. And here again are, sorry about that. Here again are both tax and mans all recorded. And then they had to go back and code. You would see how many tax, how many mans. And so you can kind of see the difference, the topography of these mans and tax before and after. Okay. The independent variable or the intervention is speaker immersion protocol. This protocol is basically 30 establishing operations divided into 2 sessions of the day. So I've actually done this in the school setting. I did one during the morning transition and the other 15 EOs during lunch, for example. How did they contrive or create 30 EOs in the school day? Remember, you don't want these EOs to be the same EOs as in the second probe, right? But you use interrupted chain method, the blocking access to things, withholding items, and increasing the EO for a man. What you're not doing is asking the child, what do you want? Tell me, use your words. I want ... right? You're not using those strategies. You're increasing the acquisition of pure mans. So the EO is presented. You're waiting 10 seconds for either a target or non-target man, and you're recording the response and reinforcing appropriately. If the child responded incorrectly, you're presenting an echoic, and you're recording that as an incorrect. The learner is able to acquire the reinforcer after correctly manding for the item, the target mand. The criterion is the same, 90% accuracy across 2 sessions. Some modifications were used with some learners, and you can use things like a 1-second time delay, a 0-second time delay, a 5-second time delay, changing the latency from 10 seconds to 3 seconds, right? But the idea is that the target response is a pure mand and that you're never using a verbal antecedent or a partial verbal antecedent when presenting an EO. The EO is just the increased value of that item, right? The value is increased to wash your hands when you have soap on your hands and the faucet is being blocked. That's an EO. You can create a stronger EO by contriving scenarios in the child's day, which is what they did in this study. Okay, so you need to build up that EO. Everybody's cutting some picture, but your child doesn't have the scissors, the only one without a scissors, and you're giving the instruction, you need to cut your paper. The EO is there. The child sees everybody else cutting or also loves cutting, and make sure that it is actually a reinforcer, and you're providing an instruction to cut, but the child doesn't have a scissor. That's increasing the EO that they can request scissor. If they don't request, you're waiting 10 seconds and you're giving that echoic, right? But you're presenting more opportunities, and there are 30 EOs divided into 2, so 15 EOs in 15 minutes. So that's basically an average of 1 EO a minute. So 1 mand a minute. So you got to be also very creative, very quick on your feet, and get the child to mand a lot within that 15-minute period. Remember, there are 30 EOs divided into 15 minutes. So that would be 15 establishing operations in 15 minutes. So it requires a lot on the implementer. After that, we do the post probes. So here you can see before speaker immersion and after speaker immersion, and then there's also this follow-up post probe. So this lighter white box are non-vocal mans, and you can see in this first graph here, most of the mans were non-vocal, probably screaming, crying, throwing something, grabbing, right? And then you have the non-target vocal mans, which were 5 instances and an observation. And after speaker immersion, we have tons of target vocal mans, some non-target vocal mans, but no non-vocal mans are screaming and crying. For participant A, participant B is similar. And let's see, this second graph is the verbal operants emitted during a 30-minute non-instructional session. So this is when nothing, when EOs were not contrived, but this is just like during playtime, during lunchtime, when you're just observing the child and recording how many mans and tacts they have emitted naturally in their environment. And we see a significant change. So we know that when you utilize EOs and avoid utilizing verbal antecedents, you're going to increase spontaneous speech. That's been replicated, that's started in 1993, Williams and Greer, and then also replicated by Ross, and then Tesori and Greer. And there are many other replications as well. A child acquiring a word as a mand, by the way, this is just like a side note, just because the child acquires this word as a mand does not mean that the child now can utilize the same word as a tact. Most of us know that, but that's not what this research is showing. It is showing that increasing mands in the speaker immersion protocol and blocking access, withdrawing withholding access to an item or interrupting a chain increases the EOs for a child to mand more frequently in this period of time during this intervention time. And that had an effect on increasing mands in the natural environment, and just coincidentally or collaterally, right, also has increased tax. It's still probable that the child will need direct instruction to learn new verbal operands unless they have the naming cusp, which is a cusp where children are able to, or learners are able to acquire new language indirectly in their natural environment. But until they have that, direct instruction is required. There's actually another webinar on naming. So if you're interested, it's one of the asynchronous webinars on Thinkific, on our Thinkific, okay? Why does this work? What are the tactics at play? It's fast-paced instruction, right? Even the intensive tact instruction for sure is fast-paced because you're presenting 100 extra tacts in a child's day, and you're still continuing other instruction. It doesn't mean that you're removing other instruction that the child is learning. You're just adding this on and fitting it in. You don't have to do it all at the same time, but it does have to be fast-paced. The speaker immersion is a manned intervention that requires fast-paced instruction. You're increasing the opportunities to mand in a 15-minute period of time. And that's twice a day. And then there's very short trial intervals. It's one after the next, which also fast-paced. Lots of frequent feedback opportunities for reinforcement. We use an effective error correction procedure, right? That needs to be in place and defined well. Utilizing behavior-specific praise is important for tasks. And we're also increasing multiple exemplars. So the child's not just manding the same 5 things in a 15-minute period. It needs to be naturalistic, and their opportunities need to be captured and contrived so that there are multiple exemplars of manding. Same with tacts, intensive tact instruction, multiple exemplars of a rose, right? Or of a van. So if whatever tact you're teaching, there needs to be multiple exemplars. These are the tactics that are at play. That's what makes these interventions work. This is the second code word. It's FAST for fast-paced instruction. Okay, so write down FAST. This is the second code word. You need this for your CEU cert. I'm giving you about 10 seconds to record this word. The word is FAST. All right. I want to give you some time for questions because I do see that there's quite a few and we have 13 minutes. This is kind of just, I just wanted to kind of share with you if parents or other professionals have some barrier to implementing these interventions, and if the barriers are something like, well, they already speak or they know these words that you're teaching. We need to know, what does no actually mean, right? So no could mean for a parent or for a non-BCBA to know something could be that the child points to it as a listener, right? Doesn't mean that they have the pure tact form or a speaker response to the stimulus. So identify what is no for that person. Consider choosing other words, mands, or tacts, but utilizing this intervention if it applies to your learner. And the goal here is really for the child to acquire the skill of speaking spontaneously without the invitation to speak from an adult, which is what a lot of our learners are waiting for. Some question, some vocal SD to emit language. So it's important that the child speaks because they within themselves have a desire to get their needs met and to gain attention from others around them. That decreases problem behavior. And I think it's just the way that you bring this up to parents and teachers. I've never actually come across a parent or implementer who was really opposed to doing this, but if you do hear any of these kinds of feedback from people that you're working with or parents, just some things to think about. References, and I guess we'll take some questions. Let's see. Are there prerequisites for intensive tact instruction? You definitely want to make sure that the child can emit echoics. that you have some instructional control because you're sitting them down and they need to sit and attend to stimuli. If you're showing them 2D stimuli, right, pictures, then 2D stimuli have to be something that they actually attend to, make sure that that's a conditioned reinforcer to look at a picture. Or, just to be still and have some instructional control for a certain period of time so you can get through the intervention, but that's about it. I hope that answers that question. Can you use actual objects for this, or does it have to be photos? You could use actual objects. It would just probably limit your multiple exemplars that you can use. Maybe use objects and pictures. And then, it would just be lots of objects. Maybe do a mixture. But if you're able to use actual objects, that's great. So that was Elise. Let's go. What other parts of speech work as categories? So for example, adjectives, verbs, etc. Yeah, I've done intensive tact instruction with verbs. You could modify this. The study did single word tacts, but you could do intensive tact instruction with adjective, noun, combos, right? You could definitely modify this to meet the needs of your child, of your learner. Especially if they have a large vocabulary, but maybe nothing is really a pure tact yet. Are there 5 different stimuli for each category, or just 5 different exemplars for each stimuli? So in the study, there were 5 categories. There were 4 stimuli in the category and 5 exemplars of each of those 4. So that gives you 20 pictures per category. Sometimes I've done it the opposite way around, right? My learner is a quick learner. I can teach them 5 different stimuli and only show them 4 exemplars of that 5, but I still end up with 20 for that category. Okay. The idea is that they have 100 opportunities to tact. And the more, as you get to session 2 or session 3 within a set, you're going to see that the child is acquiring more of those tacts and needing reinforcement more frequently. And that is motivating also, which increases the reinforcer of attention. Where do you recommend one obtain materials to run ITI? I usually make a PowerPoint because that allows me to present as fast as possible. I just hit the right arrow and I get lots of tacts. That's also what a lot of the studies I've read have done as well. So it is effective. And remember, we want to measure the effectiveness of this study in the probe, because we want to see, is this child acquiring language and spontaneous language in their natural environment, right? That's really what we care about. So you can do this with a PowerPoint and present 100 slides through a PowerPoint. The child is seeing stimuli and emitting tacts, seeing stimuli and emitting tacts at such a high rate that this becomes a new skill set for them, right? It's so intensive that we see an impact or a change in their behavior in their natural environment. So I like using PowerPoint because it allows me to present everything very quickly. It's motivating because a child doesn't have to wait for you to get materials together. Let's get to some speaker immersion questions. Oh, somebody's asking, Yukyung is asking if this intervention can be used for learners who aren't vocal, that they use PECs. Yeah, why not? You're still teaching the operant if they have enough mans in their vocabulary that they can do intensive tact instruction, sure. I don't think there's any studies out there, so it'd be really interesting to do and to measure if it also had an effect on your learner who uses PECs, because I don't actually know. So that would be interesting. I would definitely try it if they're ready for tacts and they're using PECs. Oh, this is a good question. I have a learner that is vocally prompt dependent. So perfect. This is our target learner. Could I use textual prompts instead? Using textual prompts, sure, but it's still a verbal prompt, right? You're not teaching a pure mand or tact if you're using either vocal or textual prompts. They're both verbal prompts. So if you have to, I would do it, but have a plan to fade out of that. Or just jump in and do it the pure tact way, and provide them with textual prompts as the in the correction procedure, and not just right off the bat. Have that be part of your correction procedure, right? So that the child then learns that in order to get it right and get social reinforcement, they need to tact spontaneously or on their own without the textual prompt. I would try that first, because you're going to get results faster, and then you don't have to plan for fading out. Question, do you use these interventions with students who are nonverbal and use speech? Okay, I answered that with somebody else. Can you collect all day data on spontaneous language during these interventions to track emergence of language throughout? Or do you only recommend it as sessions after mastery of sets? I think it's just more cumbersome and maybe not the best use of your time to be measuring their spontaneous language all day, every day. I think, it's just, you're going to get the results if you measure the spontaneous language after mastery of a set. I think you're going to see like the more drastic change, right? If you're measuring it every day, you're going to use a lot of your time and resources, and you don't necessarily need to, because these are probes. But I guess if you would like to, can't say that you can't, but I think it takes more time than you need to. What do we do with a learner with no vocal speech and limited joint attention? This learner might not be the ideal for these interventions, or they really need to acquire pure MANs before they start learning pure text. So maybe you could use chain interruption strategy or withholding strategy to capture and contrive MANs with an AAC device or a PEX device. But you might not be able to do this intervention if they are non-vocal and they are still learning how to use a device, right? So there's a ton of steps in the PEX sequence before they're ready to utilize their PEX book independently. We have 3 minutes left. Somebody's asking for a video model. I've actually looked and I couldn't find a video model, so I do apologize for that. But Kathleen, if you did want to contact me and ask questions about this intervention, you really want to use it, but you have questions, feel free to email. My email is not actually up here, but I can provide my email in the chat if you want to ask me questions. Let me just type it. So yeah, if you want to use these interventions, but you don't feel comfortable using them, I did upload articles so that you can read the procedures. You can email me if you have specific questions that I didn't get to today. That's fine. Or also email Lakin. I believe you have her email address as well, and she can forward them to me. And I think that's all we have time for, right, Lakin?
Yeah, yep.
Okay. Sorry if I didn't get to your question. I tried to go through as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and we will actually be posting, we'll have Kristin answer some of these and we'll post them on our socials. So if you have any questions that's not in the Q&A, go ahead and pop those in and we will make sure we get them answered on some of our socials. If not, we'll get an email put together for you all. Kristin, thank you so much for taking the time to share more about your extensive experience on spontaneous language. We really enjoyed getting to have you today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you everybody for participating and responding to the polls. It was really a great group to speak with.
Awesome. I will stay on for a few more minutes to answer any questions regarding CEU certificates, any other questions not pertaining to the content shared in the webinar today. And then We will also send an email with the CEU quiz and access to the webinar links as well.